Hello. In my video last week, I talked about Nigel Farage and about how, in my view, he's nothing short of a con man. And I failed to mention, of course, that he's also a racist and a xenophobe. But this provoked quite a lot of comments. I did receive a lot of comments to last week's video, and some of them were from people who clearly worship Nigel Farage. And I thought, just to give you an idea as to how ridiculous some of these people are, I'd read out a whole load of their comments at the end of this video. But before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit about the announcements by Rachel Reeves last week about the new big infrastructure projects which are being planned. In particular, the railway between Cambridge and Oxford, and the third runway at Heathrow Airport. Now, the thing about infrastructure projects is they take a very, very long time. And when people will judge this government by whether or not they're feeling better off after 4 years, 4.5 years, when the next election is held, these infrastructure projects are not going to be finished for probably 15, 20 years. Certainly not the runway at Heathrow, something which has been actually talked about for 20 years. And just look at these two projects. The one between Oxford and Cambridge is a good idea. It'd be very nice if there's a bit of better connections and so on. But is it really, really, really that important, considering it's going to cost so much and take up so much time? They talk about there being 18 new towns created along this line. Well, fine. And funnily enough, it's not even going to be electrified, the line. It's going to use diesel engines, apparently. But you have to say, the way that the idea is to make that, of course, a Silicon Valley between Oxford and Cambridge, and when we become an AI superpower. But the way things are changing at the moment, the speed at which things are changing at the moment, you have to wonder whether or not that's still going to be a valid aim in 10 or 15 years' time when it's completed. And the funny thing is that I think this gives you an idea as to how utterly clueless the government are when it comes to priorities in order to go for growth. Because that's what they want to do. They keep banging on about going for growth. I suspect that when Rachel Reeves went to Davos, she probably found that people weren't quite as gullible when she started talking about going for growth, and probably one or two people would have raised eyebrows. But anyhow, as far as going for growth is concerned, the only way we're going to get growth is by creating new businesses and helping existing business to expand. That's the only way it's ever going to happen. And that's something you never hear the government talking about. You never hear them talking about how they can encourage people to start businesses, how they can support businesses. And there's so many things they could be doing in that regard. As I've said so many times before, every single big business in the entire world began as a startup. And you just have to get people starting businesses. Even so, it's going to take years and years and years before we see a result. And even so, majority of those businesses will fail very quickly. But if you don't, with the rate that businesses are closing at the moment, we're going to be left without an economy soon. And what is going to be left is going to all be owned by foreigners anyway. And so it's completely misguided, really, I think, not to concentrate on small and medium-sized businesses, and bearing in mind, of course, that for small and medium-sized businesses, exporting is really off the cards now because the EU is virtually closed to small and medium-sized businesses. And so with this big project between Oxford and Cambridge, they've got someone in to run the whole thing, to overlook the whole thing, and they haven't got a big engineer, and they haven't got a big structural engineer, civil engineer, like you would do if you were building any civil engineering project almost anywhere in the world. No, they've got in a scientist, and they've got Patrick Vallance, because he's well known, because he was a bit of a spokesman when it came to the COVID crisis, and so he's going to be running it. What he knows about civil engineering, I don't know, and building railways and all that's involved, no idea. But anyway, he's going to be overseeing that. Now, as far as the third runway is concerned, whether you agree with it or you don't, it is an enormous project. We've been talking about this for 20 or 30 years. It's as long as I can remember we've been talking about it. It's going to involve moving part of the M25, which is in itself an enormous undertaking, and it's going to involve demolishing apparently 1,000 buildings and to make way for the runway. And all in all, it's going to be hugely expensive. No one has said yet, as far as I know, how much it's all going to cost, or who's going to pay for it. I mean, are we going to pay for it, or are the owners of the airport going to pay for it? I mean, the airport is pretty profitable, and it's already a huge airport. We're going to make it bigger. It's said, of course, that this is going to help the whole country, though it seems most likely it'll concentrate more wealth and more activity in London. But I was looking at the ownership of Heathrow Airport. This is our biggest and most profitable airport, and the ownership is as follows. As far as I can see, there's 22% is owned by France, 20% is owned by Qatar, 15% is owned by Saudi Arabia, 11% is owned by the Australia Retirement Trust, 10% is owned by the China Investment Corporation, 5% is owned by the Italian State Railway Ferrovia, and 3% is owned by Canadians. And like every other big infrastructure, like all our utilities, it's virtually all foreign owned. I mean, are they going to chip in for it? They're going to benefit. If the airport is that much busier, they're going to make much more profit. I mean, are they going to chip in? Are they going to pay for moving the M25? And so I think this will be dragging on. It'll not be the next parliament or the parliament after that. It'll be 3 or 4 parliaments down the road before it's ever finished. They talk about planes taking off in 2035 or 2040. It's a long time. There'll be no end of problems and hassles and delays, I'm sure, despite the fact they claim that they're going to simplify all the planning regulations. And so I wonder whether this is the sort of thing that the government ought to be concentrating on, and whether it isn't just all a big distraction really from the way things are otherwise in the economy. And I think it also it shows once again that they really don't have much idea about business. And I quoted extensively from Jonathan Reynolds' interview with Rachel Reeves at Davos last week, and clearly ain't got a clue. And again, as I said before, nobody in the government has a day's experience in their entire lives. And I think it's a great pity. I think when it's so absolutely obvious what we need to do, when it's so absolutely obvious and becoming more and more obvious what a mistake leaving the EU was to go on with these sort of infrastructure projects is to me not a priority. So anyway, let me... and incidentally, actually, if I may just add this, when you look at our government and you look at total lack of business experience, and then you look across the Atlantic to Trump, we all know he's crazy, but he has absolutely surrounded himself by businessmen, immensely wealthy businessmen who are going to profit, no doubt, a lot from any reforms he does and tax cuts and so on, but at least they know about business. And that's why the American economy has been doing so well, and that's why it'll no doubt continue to do well, because there are businessmen involved at the top. And I'm not sure we got that many big businessmen these days, because everything's sold to foreigners or people have gone abroad and so on. But anyway, let me read you some comments from Trump supporters. There are quite a lot of them, so if you get bored, you can just you don't have to watch to the end. But some of them are really quite remarkable. I think the most remarkable thing about them was that there are so many, and they're just so stupid. It's just not believable, and the grammar's dreadful and all the rest of it. Somebody called RJW, he said, please explain why all, in capital letters, of the EU members who did not Brexit, in capital letters with exclamation marks, are also struggling. Anyway, we all know that Brexit has only been half done, in inverted commas, thanks to our MPs who are more supportive of EU, WEF, UN, ECHR, WHO, and the CCP, I think that's the Chinese Communist Party, than they are the UK. The Nobby Noonar says, Brexit has happened, like it or not, it's history. Get over it. What is quite interesting these days is the way that ministers respond to any question about Brexit, particularly Keir Starmer. It's almost though he laughs it off. He's really quite smug about it. And then somebody says, what about considering trying to rejoin the customs union, the single market? And he says, no, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And they're all the same. No, it's not going to happen. You can keep asking as much as you like. It's not going to happen. And yet everybody knows what a disaster it's been and how much it's costing us all. Somebody with a long name called Why We Should All Use Bicycles, he says, you're a very sad man. Michael Moran, he says, we haven't had Brexit. The government failed to deliver what the majority of Leavers voted for. I would say Anthony Blair done irreparable damage to the British economy, which was continued by Tory administrations. John Hasty, he says, Farage was just one mouthpiece amongst many. Was Farage Prime Minister? The British public voted for Brexit. You're an ignorant, stupid man. Mark, why do you get so cross, these people? They've got their Brexit. Mart Spar, he says, the mistake Farage made was to trust the half-baked Conservatives to deal with Brexit. Kirsty Ellaby, she says, oh dear, you are delusion. She doesn't use any grammar or capitals. Nothing to do with Labour's tax rises on employment. Maggie Thatcher was always against EU membership back in the late 70s. And then she says, a company I worked for was excelling in Europe up to Labour getting in. Now they're, spelt T-H-E-I-R, now they're struggling. She seems to be suggesting that a company that she was working for that was presumably exporting to the EU or importing from the EU suddenly started doing badly when Labour got in. I don't know what change that would have affected the business, but there you go. John Burton, he says, Farage is our saviour. We should all thank him for our escape from the EU dictatorship that our poor European cousins, spelt C-O-U-N-C-I-N-S, are still trapped inside. But I certainly hope they join us soon. It's certainly looking very likely. However, it's the Uni Party, that's the new catchword, that has destroyed Britain. But once Reform is in power, we can start to rebuild it again. Somebody called Virtual Al says, whiny Remainer. The Conservatives negotiated the appalling Brexit agreement to placate Remainers in their party. Yet in your eyes, they are given a free pass. Selective, in brackets, and failing memory. I think he's suggesting my memory is failing. Rob M. the First says, Tony Blair started this. The very first thing he did when he got into power was to remove the death penalty for treason. That tells you everything about what he had planned for us. So I suppose, had he not, I don't know if he did or not, but had he not removed the death penalty for treason, presumably everything would have gone all right, would it? Martin Leafneymark, he says, Brexit didn't happen because politicians, civil service, the elite, socialists and the EU did not want it to happen. EU is on its knees. It was always going to happen. No BS says EU and elites have been asset stripping the UK, Greece, Italy, Spain for 40 plus years. Now they're working on Germany. Brexit did not happen. David Carter is more to the point. He says crap. The real Robert Birchall, he says, that whiskey nose is becoming rather obvious, Michael. I haven't drunk spirits for 30 years, Robert. Raymond Webb says, Michael, a lifelong Labour voter, patiently waited for Labour to win a election, and I ended up with Starmer. Oh dear, what a disaster. Eamon O'Daby says, and you are great. What is the state of Europe? Another bollock. I can't understand that. Here's one from Denise Schwartzel. Stop promoting propaganda. And Nigel is wise to distance himself from, and she puts E. Musk in brackets in capitals. Nigel did the best thing for UK Brexit border control, spelt wrongly, which has been abused by parties out of his control. You forget Nigel stepped down from being involved in politics. His businesses was his livelihood until recently. I don't know what business is. Is that where he gives that messages on YouTube? Britain is no longer British. You have a country worse than apartheid, as you have criminals running this country. Pakistani gangs raping white girls and children in brackets. And SA are getting sick and tired of Musk. Duo father and son. Nigel is not for sales to be dictated by someone with money. No kickbacks. Ignorance is bliss. UK is no longer British. Really sad, isn't this stuff? Really sad. Barry King. What a load of twallop. Just wait for Nigel to become PM. Then we get back to a proper Brexit. Can't wait for all the woke tears. Mr. 145. Deluded old joker posts on YouTube. Colin Newmarch, he says, do give it a rest. Gina Schiefer. It was the responsibility of the British government to walk away straight away and not leave Northern Ireland behind in the EU. It was the government that failed the country, and still do. Then Robert Wilson says, Michael Lambert and all his supporters are as thick as shit. Farage will save this country from the woke idiots who want uncontrolled immigration and insecure borders, and Aldo, with a capital A, the bullshit green agenda. 240 says, he says, it's really tragic seeing you consume yourself, having Nigel Farage living in rent-free in your head. The people voted for Brexit. Business for many has been nothing but success since we left. We left in inverted commas. I hope you find peace in your journey of recovery. I'd love to know which businesses are successful since leaving the EU. Somebody called Michael McKelvey. He says, I thought it was David Cameron who called the Brexit vote and lost. It was not Farage. Farage was just a Euro MP who saw the corruption of the EU. The EU is, listen to this, the EU is very corrupt. It must be. You cannot deal with 27 countries and trillions of pounds without being somewhat corrupt. The Watchman. What's wrecking Britain are those who tried to thwart Brexit and those who failed to implement it. Martin Loudon, he says, only a complete moron would believe that we actually left the EU. We were cheated out of a real Brexit by the Boris-led Tories, aided, might I add, by the duplicitous Farage, when he stood down 300-plus candidates in the 2019 general election. The only tangible change is the spitefulness of the Europeans towards British travellers with their overreaching, heavy-handed administration at passport control. The European travellers have no such poor treatment when they arrive here in the UK. And calling Brexit voters gullible just about sums you up. You're bitter because you were not able to get another vote or to overturn the winning vote. One day we will says, if we had stayed in the EU, we would be ripped off left, right and centre. The EU is ruled by unelected bureaucrats like a dictatorship. They've banned another election in Romania because they didn't like the result. See, if you post on here, you really, really, really should know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you just look absolutely ridiculous. The vote in Romania was cancelled by or postponed by the Romanian High Court because they were suspicious of Russian interference in their elections. Had nothing whatsoever to do with the EU. He then goes on to say, we are in a bad place at the moment, but the majority of EU members are going bankrupt thanks to the USA. He's just talking utter rubbish. Mohammed Udin says foreigners should be encouraged to have one-child family, otherwise native people will disappear from Britain. Disaster. Carl Defoe says, I've never heard such a pile of unsubstantiated bullcocks in all my life. Just read just a few more and then I'll finish if you're still here. Emma Kakoi says, the economy was crashed by the Europhile politicians that don't believe in anything. Here you are talking nonsense about Nigel Farage, who believes greatly in Britain. We have voted and left the failing EU, so deal with it and stop suckling. Suckling, I think that's the baby pigs do, isn't it? Someone called 5000 BC, he says, Michael, you really are clueless, short-sighted and misinformed. If you don't know the facts, then you shouldn't postulate on a subject you know nothing about. That puts me in my place, doesn't it? Kind Key says, Brexit was about immigration. The UK populace wants to stop immigration, but the politicians keep increasing it. Every MP is on the make to single out Farage as in it for the money is well disingenuous. We don't want any more clannish, nepotistic immigrants coming in. I've never heard them described as clannish or nepotistic, but there you go. Some computer-generated name says, hey, dickhead, yes, that's you, Michael Lambert. Mr. Farage has never been in government, so stop with your bull-shit at best and straighten up. Lies. David Miles says, if Farage had been running the country for the last few years, you would have a valid point, but seeing as he hasn't, you remain a whinging, lying wanker. Stephen Charnock. We're doing badly because we have a bunch of Labour idiots in power. The EU is doing badly as it was expanding to get cheap labour to fill the lower paid jobs, and it was living on cheap Russian gas and oil. The truth is out there for all to see. We voted leave, so crawl away and accept democracy. As for the prefect story, even the college was being infiltrated by the left at that time. You know nothing. Just three more. Patrick Walsh, he's not disappointed. He says, this used to be an interesting channel. Debbie Burgess, she says, this old codger is a liar. Maybe, Debbie, you could write in and tell me what I'm lying about. And Rob Gustafson, he says, this video is absolute nonsense. The economy is wrecked by 100 years of Tory and Labour governments with the help of the Liberals. Get it right. I didn't realise that. So it's everybody who's ruined everything. Okay. And finally, Chris Ward, he finishes off saying, you're, Y-O-U-R, talking crap. Don't blame Nigel. So there you have it. There are the supporters of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. I did see a tweet the other day saying, how could anybody... How can anybody take seriously a party that has only 5 MPs, 2 who live abroad, 3 keep their wealth offshore to avoid paying tax in the UK, 1 has served a prison sentence for assault on a woman, and 1 has been a Labour councillor, a Tory minister, and is now a member of Reform? Fair point, really. But anyhow, that's what I think about it. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd be grateful if you do so. And so until next time, thank you for watching, and bye for now.